Look, to me, a growth culture really means creating a continuous learning culture where learning isn't something you just step out of work to do, but it's embedded as part of how we work every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to iVentiv's Insight series. I am delighted to be joined today by one of iVentiv's longest standing members of our network, William Varsos. William is the head of global learning for Marsh, but has had a storied career at Citi, at Kantar, at S&P Global, and at Macquarie, and most recently joined iVentiv for our Learning Futures New York session in March at MetLife. Where you led one of our breakout sessions. And so I'm really pleased that we have a chance to bring that conversation and bring your insights to more of our global audience. So thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Always great to partner with iVentiv and good to see you again, Hannah.
Yeah. And actually something that we spoke about both at the event and in our catch-ups ahead of that time was really just about the moment in time that we're in, how critical learning and development will be for really driving that business, the business strategy. And I mentioned your career across those organizations. You've designed learning for everyone from new hires right the way through to the most senior executives. I'd be curious to know, is there anything that you feel stays the same no matter who you're rolling out learning to, or is there anything that needs to change when you work with those most senior of populations?
Yeah, thank you. And great question. I mean, honestly, at the risk of sounding really pedantic, it's essentially the same core principles across design. And for me, it really starts with knowing the learner. So we are all time and attention poor, and senior leaders are especially so. They have less time capacity to devote to their own development. They might not even feel encouraged to do so. So you really do have to maximize the impact of the time that you do have with them. And a couple of ways that I've learned to do that is a similar principle to whatever kind of design we're promoting is to make it feel real, to make it feel practical and digestible. So with leaders, we're sometimes afraid about making them work in the classroom. So we over rely on more passive approaches like lectures or panels or listening activities. But when you push them to actually do in the classroom, the results can be surprisingly good and memorable. And that's something that I like to incorporate into whatever we're producing for our seniors. Keep it immersive. And lastly, I'd say at the senior leader level, I find it really important and valuable to incorporate opportunities for peer learning, to have connectivity and networking time in the session. Leaders often feel increasingly isolated in their roles, I believe. So having them see similarities between themselves, learning from one another, and building connections with their peers can be really positive. Just knowing that there is someone else at that same level doing something similar or having similar challenges, and you're not alone, can be really impactful.
Absolutely. Well, that is exactly the space that iVentiv try and answer, because we also hear that from many people in our network. One thing I often say to peers of yours when we're connecting ahead of sessions is, when they tell me their challenges and what they're working on, I'll say, look, I can't promise that the people that you'll meet in the room have the answer. I can promise they have the same questions as you do. And so half of the battle is just bringing you to a space and a time where you can connect with peers and say, look, is anyone else going mad? Is anyone else, has anyone else cracked this and that they can help with? Or do you know what? I was up against this challenge. I found something that really works and I would love to pay that forward to the community. So that's something that we also hear as well. And it's interesting the way that you connect, I guess in that way that what works for senior leaders must work for those early learners as well, because that is who you want them to become. So if you can start to embed those principles even in those new hires, then it means that you're building a nice pipeline towards that. And I guess in the idea of an organization that grows and develops, I know you've spoken a lot about growth culture as well in the past. What does that really mean in practice, have you found, in the organizations you've worked in?
Also, a great question, Hannah. Look, to me, a growth culture really means creating a continuous learning culture where learning isn't something you just step out of work to do, but it's embedded as part of how we work every day. So I'm fortunate in that at Marsh, our employee value proposition, which we refer to as our colleague value proposition, really truly and genuinely aspires to creating a learn without limits culture. And for us, that means fostering continuous learning at all levels, encouraging our colleagues to see new knowledge, to seek it out, to develop new skills, embrace challenges as opportunities for career growth. And that means for us as a learning team that, we need to make our learning resources accessible. So we've balanced open enrollment and nomination-based approaches. We are focusing on creating learning journeys specific to people in specific roles, and of course, promoting self-directed learning as well as targeted role-based solutions wherever we can.
Mhm.
And secondly, the inclusivity of diverse perspectives is truly important. Yes, we do teach you core approaches, but empowering learners to contribute to each other's development is important. Things like global learning days that incorporate learner-sourced or learner-driven and delivered content and facilitation from our colleagues across the entire globe and enterprise really truly help us achieve that.
Mm.
And then, you know, I think as a general rule, it's important to move past just formal education or learning programs, embedding learning and experimentation into the daily workflow, whether that be with just-in-time learning, AI agents and assistants, AI virtual tutors, or, active role plays and practice opportunities, goes a long way in helping with the adoption and application of whatever they've learned in that classroom.
Mhm. I think one of the most powerful things that you mentioned there is even that pivot from, an employee value proposition to a colleague value proposition, even the way you're thinking about them not as, in the abstract or as objects, but your peers, colleagues. There is a shared sense of responsibility that all contribute to that shared sense of we are all here to learn and to grow. We all contribute to the end goal. And sometimes even those smallest of semantic shifts are actually the most powerful in growing that. And initiatives such as Global Learning Days, I know of a few organizations that have been able to implement them, and there's always been to great success. But it does maybe sometimes feel like that's the pinnacle, that's what we are working towards. We would love to have that endorsement and that buy-in from the whole organization, a day dedicated to learning. For those that are maybe they see that on the horizon or is something they want to work towards, what are maybe some of the first few things you would recommend embedding in an organization to build to such a recognized and robust learning culture?
Yeah, really great question. And I think for us, it's about making sure that the design and focus of these events doesn't stay static, that it evolves and changes with whatever the priorities are for the business, but also what the colleagues are telling us that they want to learn more of. So every time we initiate this process, we reach out through our partners in HR and the business to find out what our colleagues really invested in. And we sort of, for lack of a better word, crowdsource some of that content that needs to be in there. And all the faculty who presents on these days are actually sourced from the business because they have a deep subject matter expertise or passion on something. And that's really helped us make sure that these global days stay vital and stay fresh. The other is to get our sort of senior leaders to sponsor and promote, sending a message to say that we want and encourage, and this is important for you to attend goes a long way in encouraging people to feel empowered to participate. And then on the other end of the spectrum, once the learning is done, we don't want it to be finished. We send out the recordings. We see an incredible appetite for the recordings, which equals the volume of people who join the live sessions throughout the entire enterprise, which is great. And those stay there evergreen for people to engage in. And then we use a lot of whatever feedback we got from one global learning day or what topics that were really important for us to cover, but we just didn't have time. We feed that into the next one and then go back to the clients and sort of ask, what's top of mind? What do you want to focus on? And this way it feels like less of a top down, I'm telling you what you need to learn versus we're sort of giving you and enabling you to have a forum to teach yourselves about things that matter to you.
Fantastic. And you mentioned in there, and it's something I've always been impressed when you've talked about your work, particularly at Marsh, is how closely it is aligned to the business, how much you are listening to the business needs and matching that and being a true driver of strategy. In your opinion, is there a balance to strike between driving measurable business impact, but also investing in people's long-term development?
Yeah, I've never really seen these as competing energies. To me, these are synergies. Investing in people's, development drives business performance. So you can't do one without the other. And the stronger the talent you have, the better your results. That goes without saying. So the more skill building you provide, the more capability and change readiness you build, the more engaged talent you have, and the more retention and output you'll secure. So I've always viewed our development efforts as a direct contribution to business results, and that's a real important key for me in order to ensure that we continuously align learning initiatives and priorities directly with business goals for the business and with the business, not in sort of a ivory tower, if you will. That means learning programs are designed with measurable outcomes that actually contribute to the business performance, whether that's improving productivity, driving innovation, enhancing customer experience, or client growth, or leadership. And it's always important to create a culture of continuous learning where the employees actually feel empowered to invest in their learning. For a learner, this would involve things like offering personalized development paths, coaching, opportunities for stretch assignments that build both current and future capabilities. And I see these things running alongside what you might call the more formal expectations around learning solutions. And as I mentioned earlier, it really is important to involve your leadership as champions for development. So, whether it's from managers to business leaders, having them encourage learning as an expectation, not just of the people who they work with, but of themselves, and visibly being seen as engaging in learning, sends perhaps the strongest message of all.
Yeah. And with things, things shifting so much and changing, the pace of change, people might argue has never been faster, to use one of those buzzwords. But with all of that pace and what's happening, I think the learning agility is more important than ever, not just what people are learning now, but their capacity to continuously learn, and to shift and change as that pace does move as well. And with things shifting so quickly, how can learning leaders really future-proof talent, especially those high potential talent that you want to keep in the business without chasing some of the trends that we see?
Super question, and one that I think today means more for us to solve than ever. And, in this aspect, I'm often reminded of that movie Up. I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know if that was Disney or Pixar. I can't remember. Where the animated dogs in that film stop whatever they're doing, no matter how important it was, to chase a squirrel that suddenly appears on the screen. And I find there are a lot of squirrels in our work life and in our learning industry today. And it can feel like our focus gets really distracted really easily. So for me, it's often about building foundational skills plus adaptive capabilities that really make a difference. So helping people be successful in their current roles by building the core skills, knowledge, and mindset needed to excel, but also helping them feel prepared to embrace and cope with change is becoming increasingly important. And if things don't fit into one of those camps, odds are it's probably not a strong priority for you. It will come down to what matters most for the business strategy, but core competencies like leadership, critical thinking, problem solving, EQ, digital literacy, and AI skills, of course, these to me are what provide a strong base for employees to succeed today and tomorrow. And those are the things that we should continuously focus on.
I love that example. I will, as someone that is guilty of distraction and of, of reading something and thinking, oh, should I follow this? Is this the new thing to be mindful of? I will start to ask myself, is this a squirrel? Am I chasing a squirrel at this
Great.
moment? And from just from even even the shortest of conversations with you, you can tell you've really reflected on how to be not just a leader for now, but a leader for the future. How can you make sure that you are matching not just Marsh's vision, but the colleagues as well, and making sure there's learning and development opportunities there, which I'm sure is the sum of all your experiences. If you could give a bold piece of advice to fellow heads of learning that maybe want to rethink how they're approaching L&D strategy, or be a little bit more mindful and thinking of it as in a future focused way, what would that bold piece of advice be?
Ooh, there's a lot of things I think we need to focus on, and I'd be crazy and remiss not to actually call out the impact of AI as it relates to transforming not just our lives, which it has and will continue to do, but how we work, and I think also how we can start to learn. I'm confident that we're probably all tackling this as part of our curriculum focus, in some way or another, and right now, many of us are probably focusing on helping our employees build their proficiency and adoption across AI tools, and sort of embracing that from a productivity perspective across multiple learning audiences. I'd also recommend that we focus on ourselves. So, how do we, as learning professionals, integrate AI not only in what we teach, but how people teach and how people learn? And that sort of means investing in AI capabilities within our learning functions. Like, are we training our designers, our facilitators, our learning experts to embrace AI and how they can leverage that to help others learn? Are we relooking at our technology platforms where people engage with our products? And are we creating simplified, streamlined, smart ways to channel our products to them? And of course, are we transforming how we deliver learning? So, are we incorporating AI into the classroom experience? Are we giving people development prompts afterwards to help them see AI as a development partner? Those are the kinds of things that, if we're not doing right now, we should be. And those are the things that, we need to start as a baseline, but we will continuously grow and evolve in this space as technology starts to continuously advance. And then alongside that, like, part of it would be with the onset of AI and how it transforms our learning. What do we need to divest in? And what are some of the things that may not have as strong an impact as they have had in the past? So, this may also be controversial, but some things that I continuously think about are some of our traditional methodologies, asynchronous learning, online learning, even virtual learning. Are they as impactful or appealing to the learner today as they might have been a few years ago? We're burnt out from this format, some would say. Learning online via sessions, in person, these are the things that we have to really think about. And what do we put in the classroom versus find another way to deliver?
I think that's it. It's a really important reminder and almost a call to action to your peers that as learning leaders, you also need to be learners yourselves, and need
Absolutely.
to invest in that own development and really recognize that this is a moment in time, not just that you're responsible for teaching the organization about or you're upskilling the organization on, but also introspectively and becoming a learning leader for the future. As you say, what is maybe perhaps become sunset, and it is hard to let go of or hard to unlearn, but you really need to pivot that mindset. And one conversation that we had separately recently was talking about just what a moment we are living in, and it is not so much of a gradual evolution, but a sharp left turn of a cargo ship. And really trying to make that sort of a change happen requires a real sense of maybe humility of entering into the conversation of saying, I've got to change, I've got to learn, I have to develop myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the moment where we get to champion many of the skills that we've normally put in the classroom for our employees, right? So, it's drink our own medicine, if you will. And it's an important part because if we don't start to transform ourselves and without, standing on a soapbox and preaching, I think the moment will have moved past us, and we will be, we will have lost an opportunity to even just catch up to the moment.
Yeah, completely. And hopefully that's what iVentiv can be for people, as a space where they can learn what others are doing, ask questions in a very psychologically safe way of saying, I appreciate that I need to let go of things. I have a moment to learn. What are you doing? What works for you? How can I bring this back to my organization? And so actually one of my final questions, which we sort of maybe touched on in that last answer, is if you had a controversial L&D opinion that you might want to kind of throw out to the world, maybe invite some engagement from your peers, is there one thing that's standing out to you on that?
Beyond what I've already talked about, I think the question I would have is around to my learning colleagues, what is an exciting new way that we can tackle learning that we haven't been thinking about? And again, like what are some of those unlearned moments when it comes to learning that we can retire for now or put on the shelf for another day?
I love that, William. Perhaps that's how I'll leave this conversation with that ask of you, the viewer. What is that for you? We do encourage you to, this isn't just a dialogue between me and William. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from our peers. So feel free to comment, engage, reach out to William and myself. And I know there'll be opportunities for you to meet at future iVentiv sessions. It's always great to connect with you. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Anna.